Hello there, I'm Randy Cross, and this is Unsafe Spaces. Season 3, Episode 14. We've got another good one for you. I think you'll enjoy it. We're going to be joined by Houston Nutt, former SEC Coach of the Year, one of my teammates currently at CBS Sports. We'll talk a little bit about last week's results, maybe mix in a couple of the championship games, but just the world of college football in general. And then we'll have the Unsafe Spaces Sports, we'll have the Wambulance, we'll have the Happy Trip. Everything is the same as always. But first, a short little commentary. Something happened over the weekend I'm sure most of you have heard about, but if you haven't, Reuben Foster, linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers, former University of Alabama player, was arrested in the San Francisco 49er team hotel during their road trip down in Tampa on Saturday night. It was the third domestic violence incident that he's had while with San Francisco. He was arrested. He was, as you can see, he was booked into jail, released the next day on $2,000 bail. But this is something that's happened repeatedly. This is a guy that had a marijuana arrest before he was drafted. And I know that's legal in a lot of states, but where he was drafted ain't one of them. There's things that have to be addressed here. And it's just in the process of evaluating talent. There are things you have to recognize. When you get these types of incidents, they shouldn't really shock you when you start piling up infractions. This guy's had, like I said, 3 domestic violence now charges over the last year or so. One of them, the woman declined to press charges. It's the same woman in all 3. So, yes, there's issues. Yes, people like to say, oh, there's another side to the story. Yeah, I'm sure there is. But you know what? Hard and fast rule. For me, especially, and should be for everybody. Domestic violence is never excusable. Ever, ever, ever. I had 5 sisters. I've got two daughters. I've got 2 granddaughters. And if you ever touch a woman in anger, your ass is out of here. And you ought to know that in evaluation, that you have people that have anger issues or have character issues. Just remember a very important thing. And is this politically correct? No. Is it a very nice, kind, fluffy way to say something? No. But I'm going to leave you with this. And remember, there's no way to shine a turd. If it's a turd, it's a turd. And it will always be a turd. Just keep that little nugget in mind. All right? Time now, let's move on to the interview section. Well, hello. As promised, we're now going to be speaking with Houston Nutt, actually played quarterback at Arkansas, head coach there at Arkansas, head coach at Ole Miss, knows the SEC like the back of his hand, and one of the great guys in college football. Houston, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Randy.
Nah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. This is the best time of the year, isn't it?
Yeah, no doubt about it.
When you look at sort of the way things came out this year in the SEC, I guess impression one may be no real surprise when you look at the top, but overall, what'd you think of this season?
Yeah, the first thing, Randy, I want to go back to Alabama. We all expect Alabama to be good, but I never expected the offense to me just kind of separate themselves with Tua Tagovailoa. So explosive, to be able to score so fast, and the way the offense executed, it's much different than years past. Years past you knew there's going to be a good running game, you knew there's going to be good defense, good special teams, well coached. We get all that, but man, the way they play offense now, to me, is just at a different level. The receivers create so much separation, unbelievable. And then just looking at everything on the whole, Georgia, outstanding. Jake Fromm and the group, to me, they kept getting better, very athletic. Um, Defensively, they've probably been better in years past, but they seem like some of the younger guys are coming on. And you gotta give hats off to Kentucky. Kentucky did a really good job. Coach Stoops just really hung in there and did a good job the last few years of recruiting. Benny Snell, and then really when you look at Josh Allen and the defense, really done a great job of recruiting. They're athletic, and they're sitting there at number 2 behind Georgia. Just a really good year. And then on the Western side, it's always been very, very tough. But LSU, I thought Joe Burrow was a guy that kind of brought things together. Not great stats, probably not the big time guy that you're looking for, but in years past, if you put Joe Burrow, I really love some of the decisions that he made and the way he handled their offense, the way that he took care of the ball most of the year was just really good. So I just, SEC is as we all know, always a very physical, tough league, but usually the same people at the front right now. And we look for Florida and look for Tennessee to start making moves, because Florida, of course, they won. You look up and they won 9 games this year, and Coach Mullen has them going in the right direction. South Carolina got better, and I keep looking for Tennessee to get better. I know they're disappointed they didn't get to a bowl game.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt beats them, so
yeah, for the third year in a row.
Yeah, that just doesn't seem possible, does it?
Wow. Wow. Hey, and you're a guy, you've had a lot of experience in overtime games. What'd you think of that A&M LSU game the other night? I mean, 74-72. You talked about Joe Burrow and LSU. I mean, he scores 72 and loses?
It's unbelievable. I had a lot of former players that were texting me during that time saying they're going to get our record. They're going to get our record. And that unbelievable. The game just kept going back and forth, hitting the 2-point plays and just really everybody just fighting their guts out. Something else to look up there and see the score, 70-something points, the most ever. Unbelievable. Hey,
Houston, you're a coach in those situations. Give fans a little bit of a picture into those decisions that happen. I mean, no staff on this earth has, I don't know what, 8 different plays for 2-point plays. That just isn't realistic. Nobody goes in with that kind of a arsenal. Where do those 2-point plays come from? Do they come nowadays out of your normal spread? Do they come out of your short yardage packages? I mean, where do they come from?
That's a great question, because during the week on Thursday, you have 1, maybe 2-point plays that you always work on. Then all of a sudden you get to a game like that and you're going through and you look up, it's the 3rd overtime. Oh, it's the 4th overtime. It's the 5th overtime. So now you go back to what has helped you the most throughout the game, whether it be in short yardage or your 3 to 5, your 3rd down package, or whatever it is at that 3-yard line you feel like can cross that last white line. What's giving you the most success? And it looks like to me they put the ball in the hands of their quarterback. When you look at some of the plays that they dialed, I'm always curious, just the question you asked about what happens during this time. Well, you hadn't practiced on 7 overtimes. You practiced on a couple of 2-point plays at the most. And so now you lean on what gives us the best chance. Which play have we been running or what we've run in the maybe last week that's given us the best chance to execute and score. And that's what you rely on. And you just you turn it loose right there, and it's something. If you notice, Jimbo Fisher says, "Hey, I didn't realize what overtime it is." And that's the thing. You get lost in it. You're not keeping up with, okay, this is number 3, this is number 4, this is number 5.
Right.
You realize when it's number 3 when you got to start going for 2.
Right.
And then you're just into the game. You're into the next play.
Hey, yeah. Speaking of sort of offenses and plays, I wanted to see if you could explain to fans. We've seen so many, especially last weekend, and I'm sure in the conference championships, we're going to see it again. Everybody's using so much of these spread offenses, and we all love what they look like, and we love the scoring, but From a defensive standpoint, how much stress is put on these defenses when you see an offense, either when they come out just spread all over the field, or when they'll come out maybe in 12 formation, and they'll have a tight end and an H-back, and then they'll take the H-back and they'll put him in the slot. Then they'll take the tight end and they'll move him back and maybe motion him outside. Suddenly, the defense has to defend the entire field, and people wonder why receivers come just slap wide open when you have any kind of mental bust. I mean, defensively, how do you really prepare for that?
You know, Randy, if you did a study, especially the last 5 years, the biggest change is you look up in the scoreboard. I mean, the scoreboard is just the offenses are scoring so many points, and they got you from sideline to sideline. And one of the biggest things that's happening, as you know, is the RPO, which is the run pass option, where linemen, it looks as though it's run. They're coming off. It could be a handoff, and they're in run action form. And then all of a sudden, backers come up to tackle the running back thinking it's a run, and then there's a wide open window that they're throwing slants behind, right where the linebacker vacated. And so it's just unbelievable when you add that to what you're talking about with movement, motions, tight ends moving out, motioning inside, moving it outside, and then now there's a lot of adjustments and thinking, and then you're doing a lot of tackling in space, especially with up tempo. And so it's a whole different world now. And, you know, just watching the Oklahoma game, West Virginia, I mean, it's almost like you might as well take the pads off. It's offense. Their offense is going up and down the field over 500 and something yards apiece. And you just seeing people that are in space, and these athletes that are they're beating them one-on-one. It goes back to what you're saying. You got movement, motions. Now let's make sure we got to cover from sideline to sideline. So much stress on the defense that it just seems like they're behind right now. Now, I will say this. When you go watch Alabama practice and you watch Clemson practice, I've seen a couple of these teams where they're a little bit more physical during the August, September, October months. And it looks like to me those defenses continue to get better, and you don't see as many explosive plays on teams like that.
Did you see a few dents in the armor this weekend, last weekend, with the amount of scoring against, for instance, the big plays that South Carolina had against Clemson? The fact that the game's been so tight the last couple of weeks with Alabama. Or do you see things there that give people a little bit of hope? I know Michigan was disappointing with what they did against Ohio State, but they still scored a decent amount of points in that loss. Is there still hope there that some of these big dogs aren't quite as good as we think, and that in this championship week we could see even more turmoil?
I think so, Randy, and I think as teams start preparing for one another, that's one of the things they'll point to is, okay, wait a minute, South Carolina had this explosive play, had this many first downs, this many explosive big plays at certain times, and they'll study that very hard and think, hey, we have a chance to put one or two of our athletes in this particular situation. So there is hope. There's definitely hope. It comes down, you don't have to be better than them 12 weeks. You got to be better than that team for 60 minutes. And so looking forward to it. This is what makes this part of the year so much fun.
Hey, I wanted to ask you something, and I ask you this as a friend because I know you know about this intimately. But last week on the podcast, I did a little commentary about this being that time of the year when coaches are being relieved of duty or fired or whatever, and that people don't understand the sort of cascading effect and how wide that net goes when a coach is let go. Everyone always thinks, oh, well, the coach is fired. That's just the coach. Well, that doesn't include his staff, doesn't include how many people in that building are affected when that happens and how many families are affected when that happens.
Well, Randy, that's so true. There's so much responsibility from that head coach when you talk about, your 10 coaches, you talk about trainers, you're talking about strength coaches, grad assistants, And now you're talking about their wives, you're talking about their children, and it's a massive, massive deal. And I can tell you, it's so hard, and especially for the wives. The wives are the ones that they're usually always the ones that have to do the packing up, the selling of the home. The husband's trying to get to the next place, get to the next job, and here we go. I mean, you're talking about so many lives that are changed, and so many effects that happens in the stress of it. The stress of when you get fired, when you hear those words, "Hey, you're fired." It's what next? That husband and that coach is trying to put groceries on the table, and where are we going next? And the wife and the children has to. The wife is almost like a head coach of taking care of the children, getting them to school, and trying to put a smile on your face, and you go about business. But you're exactly right. It's a massive, massive deal, and it's not easy.
How do you think coaches these days, with the whole social media atmosphere that we have as a country that's so negative, how do you insulate them, or can you insulate, much less your family, but also your players, from that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's start with the family. I think that's where the coach, it's so important that the wife is so strong, because the coach, we can go in a meeting room and close the door and really try to keep the noise to a certain level, where the wife has to go to the grocery store, the wife has to take the kids to school, has to take them to the soccer game or basketball game or football game, and there's always the whispers. And what's tough is, sometimes even in grade school, your kids, some of the kids can be very, very cruel. And so there's a lot of teaching that goes on there. And it starts, to me, with the wife has to be so strong. And you keep that family very tight. And same way with the football team. And when you're in that meeting room, when things aren't going well, you close that door and says, "Hey, nobody loves you right now but your mama and us." Excuse me. And so it's important that you stay together as a team, because because of so much media, the blogs and all the Twitter world, it can be a negative world. And so, and also on the flip side, when things are going good, you want to be careful there too, because you get too many pats on the back. So it's a balancing act. And again, it's not easy, but it's important to keep that team together and keep a senior group who takes ownership of the team is so important for them to lead.
Along those lines, any of the recent firings catch you by surprise, or any of those that maybe didn't happen? For instance, a Clay Helton at USC. Any of those sort of surprise you?
Well, I'm like everybody. You sit there and you hear rumors and rumors of, and you're thinking USC's next, and I give kudos for the athletic director saying, "Hey, he's my coach," and staying with him. And let's go back to Mark Stoops. You heard rumblings about a couple of years ago, and they hung in there with him, and look at his program. So. There's nothing to me like, I have a lot of respect for a team of an athletic director that can handle the noise, the outside noise, especially when it gets loud and you got banners flying. Let's get rid of the coach, and he hangs in there. I got a lot of respect for guys that have backbone like that. But I always expect this time of year. I always expect there'll be some coaches that that are going to be let go.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Houston, I'm looking forward to working together this weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun, and can't wait to see these championship games.
Can't wait.
All right, Houston, thank you so much. All right, thank you to Houston Nutt. Fantastic stuff. Looking forward to this weekend on the air. Time now, that leads us right into Unsafe Spaces Sports. What a weekend in sports it was, too. It was fan-dang-tastic. It was what was billed as rivalry week. Easy to think, hard to say. We'll start things off here with our scores one of the biggest rivalries there is in college football. It's called the Iron Bowl. Not much of a game. Alabama clearly the better team. Auburn had their moments, at least early, and as we've seen the last couple of weeks, it was close. At one point, this game was 17-14, and then Alabama hit the booster rockets and went away. So Bama's going to be in the SEC championship game, and it'll be great to see them face Georgia, because next up on the scoreboard is the Clemson Tigers going against South Carolina. Clemson let up some points. You see the 35 points, and there were a lot of points. That's what I was referring to with Houston Nutt. Was he concerned about the amount of points and the amount of big plays? I personally saw stuff being done against Clemson's defense I hadn't seen done all year long. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, let's go to the next score. Next score, Notre Dame and USC. 24-17, probably unnecessarily close, but again, a big rivalry with the Trojans and Clay Helton and company. They played well enough, I guess, for Lynn Swann, the athletic director, to think that Helton's got stuff going forward that's worth keeping around. But Notre Dame wins that one. Next up on our scoreboard is Georgia and Georgia Tech. Good old-fashioned hate. It wasn't really close. Georgia physically dominated this game. Georgia Tech was held under 100 yards rushing, had one 100-yard kickoff return in that 21 points. But Georgia, good tune-up game for Alabama coming up. Next up on our rivalry week, Ohio State, Michigan. Michigan, this was going to be the year. Yeah, they were going to get them. Well, not so much. The defense for Michigan just imploded against Ohio State. Ohio State made a lot of great plays, but they physically manhandled Michigan. And that's something you don't see too often. Ohio State, great thing to see. Next up on the scoreboard, if you like offense in that 62 points, you had to be crazy about the 115 scored in this one. 59-56. Oklahoma, as good as their offense is, their defense is maybe a little worse, but they're just good enough when they have to be, and they were last week against West Virginia. But that's got to concern you if you're an OU fan. And how about this one? All-time scoring record in FBS history, 74-72 in 7 overtimes. Talked about this game with Houston Nutt. How does a coach have 7 or 4 or 5 2-point plays? That's crazy to me. 74-72. Wow. Okay, next up on the scores, UCF against USF. UCF won their last game, finished undefeated. They've got their conference championship game coming up, but they lost their quarterback, Mackenzie Milton. Dislocated his knee, had to have emergency surgery on his leg to restore blood flow. We're going to have to see how big of a loss this is, but this kid was one of the better players in the entire country. So UCF had enough problem with credibility going into this game. Now missing their best player, I would expect them to take a little bit of a hit when it comes to that. Let's take a look at the weekend games as far as the championship games are involved. First up is the best game out there, and that's the SEC championship game, Alabama-Georgia. This is a game that came down to overtime last year. Was a big play in overtime between Georgia and Alabama. Alabama did it. Tua Tagovailoa made that huge throw, won the game. Bama does it again. Sorry, Georgia. Next up on the list is the App State Mountaineers and Louisiana Lafayette. That's going to be in the Sun Belt Championship game. And I got to go with App State in this case. Next up on the parade of games we're going to see is going to be Texas and OU. Oh, yeah, it's going to be in Jerry's world. I think Oklahoma's going to win. 3, 4, 5 points. Heck, that could be 70-65 the way they play defense in that conference. But I think OU's just got the ability to score too many points for Texas. Next up is going to be the Big Ten championship game. That's going to be Ohio State Buckeyes against the Northwestern Wildcats. Great story, Northwestern is. Didn't win a single non-conference game, but they did well enough to get into this game. I don't think they're going to be good enough to win. They'll keep it semi-close, and when I say semi-close, I mean about 20 points. Ohio State's the better team. They win this game. Next up on the championship game list for us is going to be Utah against Washington. This game will be played in Seattle. I'm not sure. I think that's too much for Utah to overcome. And I think between Gaskin and the rest of them, for Washington wins this game out there in the Pac-12. Next up on our championship list is Pitt. It's going to play Clemson. Clemson is going to have to rally defensively. They gave up 35 points last week. Gave up a lot of big plays. I'm just not sure if Pitt can take advantage of that. They are very much a ground-type team. They can throw the ball. Can they throw it well enough to take advantage of Clemson? It'll be close for a while, but Clemson wins big. Next up in this match is going to be Memphis, and it's going to be at UCF. I think UCF wins this game. UCF overall is a better team. UCF runs the ball pretty well. Nobody runs it better than Memphis. Memphis has got a great offensive line. They've got Darrell Henderson at running back. But UCF, I think, just has too much momentum and the home field advantage in this case. Next up on our list of games, for those of you that don't always watch the Mountain West, you've got Fresno State is going to be playing on the blue carpet for Boise State. Unbelievable home field advantage, and I think Boise State wins this one as well. Next up on the list is going to be UAB and Middle Tennessee, and that's going to be for Conference USA. Great story. Bill Clark and UAB a couple years ago didn't even have a program. They weren't even playing football. And now they've got a one-loss season, and they're playing in the conference championship game. Fantastic. Can't wait to see this one. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And in the MAC championship game, you've got Northern Illinois and Buffalo. I'm going to go with Buffalo in this one. Buffalo 2 weeks ago against Ohio University turned the ball over like crazy and got blown out. And I think that they're going to sort of get a little payback to themselves, really more than anything else. And I think Buffalo ends up winning the MAC and the MAC championship game. All right, let's move on along and go to the Wambulance. You may or may not have seen this story during the week, but I saw it and was immediately struck with a case of the say what? Yeah, a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving is now racist. When I first saw that headline, to say I was surprised would be quite an understatement. Then I looked online and I saw some of the posts. And it was all about this. See, there's Franklin on the left, and he's sitting there at the table by himself on his side, and the rest of the Charlie Brown clan is on the other side. And it got tweets like this. Not watching Charlie Brown Thanksgiving anymore until they sit some people on the same side of the table as Franklin. Or the other one I loved was just hashtag privilege. If you really watched, you would know Franklin was a special guest, giving him a special chair in a place where everyone at the table could see him. Great point by you. All right. And the last one, the purpose of the episode was to point out the racial divide that existed in America. It's all the great. This is a good point. I want to bring something up too, that if you use this Google machine that's on your computer, and you put in Charles Schulz, one of the great cartoonists we've ever had here in America, who died in 2000 of cancer. In 1968, after the assassinations of RFK and Martin Luther King, Charles Schulz put a character of color, in this case Franklin, into Peanuts. He did it then to promote the diversity and to point out things and make it a character he could teach through. All right? Like I said, use the Google machine, educate yourself, and don't be such a dummy. I'd like to say something else, but I won't. It's amazing. Do your research, study the subject matter, and just learn a little bit, okay? Don't be so butthurt. All right, let's move on to our feel-good story of the week. I'm on top of the world. 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 Yeah, when you look at this story, and it's a couple years old, but it was sort of fast forward through the process. It's a story about a homeless gentleman, former Marine, who could play the piano. And we show his picture right here is Donald Gould. And he's down in Sarasota, Florida. And Sarasota, Florida had the ingenious idea that they were going to put a bunch of pianos out. And people could play them whenever they felt like it. And they discovered Donald Gould because of that policy. And thank you to Sarasota, Florida for that. Check this out.
That's Aurora. She took the video.
Yep.
Yeah. And you got how many hits off of it? 100,000.
And that was just yesterday when you were outside of Classico.
Yeah, Classico. Yeah. I'm kind of waiting right now. They usually don't set them out till about 11:30 or so. You're playing again today? Yeah, I go there about every day. Try to put my hat out and make tips.
Jacqueline Bevan is a life coach, and she's been helping Gould maneuver through all of the changes. And she says it isn't just his musical career that has blossomed.
Just watching him going through everyday things and learning to live all over again and making new friends and doing positive things and just having a normal life. We're just so proud of him. He's just grown so much. It's amazing.
Yeah, fantastic story, and kudos to the NFL teams having him out to play at the stadium. One of them is my former team, the San Francisco 49ers. It's the holiday season. We all love stories like this, but we should love stories like this every day, every week, every month, every year. All right. Hey, I want to thank you for joining us this week. I want to remind you sort of where to tell people to find us on safespacesusa.com, randycross.com. Any suggestions? To producer at unsafespacesusa.com. Suggestions, maybe the stray autograph request, whatever you want. Stories you might want to recommend to us. A great place to send them would be producer at unsafespacesusa.com. And like I mentioned, it's the holiday season, and that means a holiday season. Happy trails.
Happy trails.